Is race genetic? The truth might surprise you. Have you ever taken a DNA ancestry test and thought it could tell you your race? Or heard people say things like, this race has these genes, or people from this group are genetically different? Well, modern genetics and sociology actually challenge that idea. Race is not a biological category, even though it's treated as one. In sociology, race is understood as a social construct. That means it is something humans created based on history, culture, power, and classification, not something that exists as a fixed biological reality. Humans were grouped into racial categories long before we understood genetics. These categories were shaped by society, not biology. So while race feels real in everyday life because it affects identity and lived experience, it does not have a consistent genetic basis. Genetically, humans are extremely similar. In fact, research consistently shows that most human genetic variation exists within populations, not between racial groups. This means that if you compare two people from the same racial category, they can be just as genetically different or even more different than someone from another group. Race is often used loosely in genetics research, even though scientists rely on ancestry and population history, not racial labels. So biologically, humans don't fall into a clear genetic racial boxes. So why do people still think race is genetic? A big reason is history. Ideas like eugenics and scientific racism falsely claimed that human groups had different biological value or intelligence. These ideas use science to justify inequality and racism, even though they are now discredited. Another reason is modern DNA ancestry testing. These tests can estimate where your ancestors lived, but they are not a measure of race. They give percentages based on geographic ancestry, not racial categories. However, studies show that many people interpret these results as proof of racial identity, even though that's not what science actually says. This misunderstanding has real consequences. If people think race is genetic, they may assume that differences in health, behavior, or ability are biological, when they are often shaped by environment, inequality, and social conditions instead. That can reinforce stereotypes and affect areas like healthcare, where racial assumptions can influence diagnosis and treatment. Understanding the difference between race and genetics helps challenge those assumptions. So, the key takeaway is race is real as a social experience, but is not a genetic category. Genetics shows that humans are far more alike than they are different, and most variation does not align with racial labels. Race is socially created, genetics are shared, and biology does not divide us the way that society does.